Hi friends, this is a tutorial on how to use the pen tool in Illustrator and also how to trace over your symbols to make them into vector graphics. We're going to set up our file with the settings for your submission. So you want to keep the number of artboards at 1, and you want to make sure your units are in pixels and that your width and height are set to 800 pixels. The pen tool is on the left over here on this toolbar, and when you click on your artboard it will drop an anchor point down. You can click to drop another anchor point and it will draw a line between the 2 points, and you can also see that when I drop my pen tool down underneath there is a green guide, and that means that these 2 anchor points are aligned and it's giving me a nice vertical straight line. So I can see here again I'm now intersecting at the point of my first and my third anchor points, so when I click here I'm beginning to make a very regular and straight rectangle. Now when I hover back over my first anchor point you can see this tiny white circle pops up, and that means that I'm creating a closed shape. That means this path is now fully closed and we can start filling the colour on the inside of this path. Now to change the colour and the width of your stroke you want to go back to your your selection tool and click on the path to select it, and you will get these options in the top toolbar. The first box here is the fill colour. So we can click and change the colour of the inside of our shape, and then right next to that is the stroke colour, which is the colour of the outline. So I can make that a nice bright orange, and I can also move over here and make that stroke a bit larger for you to see. So when you select the shape again, we can go and we can actually say no stroke, and there our outline has gone. And if I bring that back to good size for seeing, we can actually take out the fill there. So we are just left with the outline again. When you're drawing with your pen tool and you want to make sure you have these really nice sharp lines, you can not only rely on the guides that Illustrator has given you, but you can hold down Shift, and as you draw it will automatically put in the 45-degree line or the 90-degree right angle for you. So you can see that anywhere I'm clicking, even if it's well off that angle, it's going to stay in the 45-degree and the 90-degree line for us, so we can make some really nice sharp and crisp shapes. So that's quite handy if you're doing regular triangles or anything like that in a repeated pattern. You can just keep Shift held down and it will automatically create these regular repeated angles for you. If you are creating a shape and you don't want it to be closed, for instance if I have these 2 lines and I didn't want to make that a triangle, to end the shape here and to stop from continuing to draw when you go off to do something else, what you can do is at your last point you can hold down Control on a PC or Command on the Macs, and you just click off and that will be the end of the shape, so you can start your new shape without having to disconnect these 2 lines from each other. So that is for straight line drawing, and now we're going to do a bit of drawing curves. So with your pen tool again, you can click for your first anchor point, but instead of just clicking for your second, you need to click and hold that mouse button down and then drag your mouse out, and that is creating these little handles that you can move around and edit, and you can see it's making that curve between the 2 points. The further away from the anchor point you drag your mouse, the sharper that curve is going to get, and the closer in, the subtler that curve is going to be. So you can actually make some really cool shapes, combining the sharp or again holding Shift and making those 45-degree and 90 straight lines. So there's my shape, and I've used curves and straight lines. And if you are sketching of your image, tracing of your image, and you have messed up a little bit of the geometry, or you haven't quite gone over a line that you wanted to, you don't have to start all over again. See, this is why Illustrator and paths are really, really powerful. You can actually select your path and then go to the little white arrow, which is our direct selection tool, And when you hover over any of these anchor points and click on them, you can see that not only can we click and drag the entire anchor point around, but you can also edit the handles and the shape of your curves. So you can do that with any anchor point that you find, and then you can just subtly kind of edit in and make sure that you're covering exactly the right angle that you wanted to. If you somehow decided you want to change your edit or something like that, you can go back in without starting over. So that's pretty handy. And the other thing that you might want to know about is if you have sort of an angular shape like this one up here, and you forgot to put a curve in here, you can actually go back in and create curves by changing the anchor points. So say I wanted to put a curve in the middle of the straight line at the top. Now, to make a curve, we kind of want an anchor point in the middle, right? Because we wouldn't want a curve on this angle or a curve on this angle. So we need to add an anchor point in. And the option for that is over on the pen tool icon itself. If you click and hold that down, you can see it says Add Anchor Point. And then we can go over and we can click in the middle of the path where we want that new anchor, and you can see that one has appeared. And then we can get our direct selection tool and we can move that up. You can see I've got a triangle, I don't have a curve. So we need to actually change this anchor point into a curve point with the little handles on either side. So again, go back over to your pen tool icon drop down menu, and at the bottom we have the Convert Anchor Point tool. And then you can just click on that anchor point, hold it down and drag it out, and there are our curve handles. And we've made that straight line into a curve. So that is quite handy to know if you wanted to do your whole thing in straight lines, and then go back in and just put these little curves if you have a symbol that would benefit from that. Okay, so that is using the pen tool. Hopefully that is going to help you when it comes to tracing things. If I just move all of this off of my artboard. So we're going to look at tracing the symbol image that you will have created. So we can drag that in from your file. I've got this little cat symbol here, or you can also go to File and place in your image from there. Just like in Photoshop, we can hold Shift and resize that within the same ratio. And remember that this box 800 by 800 is going to be the size of your submission, so you want to make sure that that fills up the box nicely so that we have a nice big symbol to submit. So we can actually start tracing over this right now. If I get my pen tool back, and I might just change the color of my pen tool to something nice and bright so you can see it. Actually, bam bam, let me change this color in a minute. Whoa, okay, so you can see that I have my fill on and it's actually filling it with grey every time I draw. So you can see I'm just doing this roughly, but you would follow the lines, you would click and drag and follow those curves, putting in little straight lines where you need to. And I'll just fill this out really roughly so we're not here forever. And then bam, close that. And now I can select my path and I can finally take off the fill, and I can change the stroke to something quite bright and a little bit bigger. So there's my great tracing of the cat drawing, and remember we can go and get with our white arrow and we can adjust any of these little points that we want to, and just kind of make sure we've matched all of those up really well. So this is how you would kind of trace your image to start off with. If you have lots of tiny little areas, you can zoom in and you can make these all individual closed shapes. So you can say, okay, I'm doing this little petal, bam, close that, and then you can fill that with a certain color. You can go off and do the next little petal and fill that with a certain color, and go on like that. We also have the layers like in Photoshop, so if you want to get a little bit crazy with your overlapping, you can create a lot of new layers and put different geometry on those layers. So the other way of tracing an image, which some of you may be aware of, let me just move my perfect cat up here, is that Illustrator offers a Lifetrace function. And this is something that we don't recommend as a final output, but it gives you a good idea and sometimes is quite useful for really simple shapes. So if you were just scanning in a circle or something that has really obvious straight geometric lines, it will help immensely. So when you have your image and it's selected, up here on the top toolbar is an image trace tool, and if we select that, you can see in a second that it's changed the geometry of the cat. So it's made all of those pixels into maths equations, and it's drawing the lines now for a vector graphic instead of a raster image. You can see, if we zoom in a little bit on these flowers down here, that say if I had drawn the center of this flower to be a circle, you can see that the computer has taken some shortcuts, and it's something that you want to be able to control. So you shouldn't rely on Lifetrace as your final result. But once you have something like this, what you can actually do is pop up to the expand button, and it will actually show you all of these little paths and anchor points that the computer has made. So just like when we're doing manual tracing, you can select the path and you can actually play around with the curves that it's made and start editing this a little bit better and making it look more like the design that you intended it to be. So you can Lifetrace, but just make sure that you're going in, fixing up all the little details, and making sure that you're in control of the computer rather than the computer being in control of you. Okay, so again, maybe it's better to do complicated stuff like this by hand, so you're getting all of those little details, but you can see it's given us a pretty nice outline of the cat. Maybe want to go in and kind of make these lines a little bit more even. Okay. So that's live tracing. I wanted to show you one more thing before I leave, and that is the fact that live tracing is best used with pen images. So you can see in my folder I have this image of a cat that's in pencil, and if I bring that in, I just want to show you what happens when we try and live trace pencil drawing. So for your Project 2 submission, you are required to have your symbol drawn in ink, but for any future work in Illustrator, I just want to show you what happens if you try and bring in a pencil drawing and live trace that. So if we go to Image Trace, you can see that automatically it has kind of ignored all of the grey and the light areas in our pencil drawing, and it's converted only the darkest spots into geometry. So this isn't a great depiction of a cat at the moment. What you can do to try and fix this is you can go to the left of your tracing result, and that'll bring up this little options panel. So I recommend playing around with the threshold first. So the threshold is basically how much data the live trace is going to pick up from your source precedent. So if we bump that up to a higher number, you can see it's picked up more of the geometry from underneath, and it's looking more and more like a cat, which is great. But you can also see how it has taken these shortcuts and it's made everything really smooth and filled in a lot of spaces. So it's not always the best if you're looking at a pencil drawing. The other thing is the mode change. You're working in black and white for the whole of Project 2, but if you have anything else for future work, you can also work in grayscale. And you can see that's bringing in all of these little tones, and if we bring up the number of greys that we allow in the image, that should get even more defined. Oh, or not. Okay. There's also a colour mode for any colour images that you're tracing, and you can play around with these in your own time. But that's just a little thing. That's why we need you to bring these images in ink, so you're getting a really strong line, and it also helps when you are tracing your images. So back to my quick little cat, we're just going to do a quick export and I'll show you the files that you need for submission. So because we set our artboard up as 800 by 800, you don't have to worry about sizing. This is the size that you will be submitting. And you need to submit a PDF, which you have learnt all about from the past tutorials, and you're also going to be submitting an SVG, which stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. Now, it's not very hard to export. You basically go to Save As. Again, make sure everything you want to export is within this little white box. And then name it something suitable. So we can call this Cat SVG. And in the drop-down menu, you see you have options for the Adobe PDF, just like in Photoshop. And you also have the .svg here. So you can see I've done a few as tests, but we'll save this one out. You can ignore this little panel and just click OK. And that will have saved it into, if I find the right folder, that will have saved it here as an SVG. And to preview this, we'll need to open it in a browser. So let me just open a new window here and pop that into there, and you can see we have our SVG and it is scalable. So if you zoom right in, you can see we're at 500%, and we're still keeping those nice crisp lines because it isn't made of pixels, it's made out of little maths equations which the computer is calculating for us. So that is the benefit of a vector graphic. It's never going to lose its quality.